Are you looking for a podcast where you can hear from real people regarding their real dental drama? If so, then you've come to the right place. Join hosts Bethany Petty and Dr. Reena Kuba as we dive into the solutions we've created and the mistakes we've made while managing dental drama. Let's get started.
All right, so we're back again, and I'm kind of excited about this episode because I have called it WWKD. What would Kuba do? So I get to pick your brain today.
Do y'all get bracelets? Can we get a bracelet made?
We're going to start a trend with
Headbands,
bracelets
something?
and T-shirts. Scrub caps.
Scrub
There
caps.
we go.
I like it. I like it.
So we are going to dive into an issue that has popped up on 3 different occasions for me with some clients this week, and I want to get your opinion on it. So I've decided, I think you came up with this terminology, and I like it. We're going to talk about Sour Patch employees.
And that's one of my employees coined that phrase and called a little one a Sour Patch, and I thought that was super cute, and it totally describes our little employees. We need them, we love them. Who doesn't love a little Sour Patch Kid? But
We got to talk about them. I mean, They're a fact of life, so we can't ignore them, and we got to deal with them. So I've got 3 different Sour Patch scenarios to talk to you about today, all of them from this week. And I just want to pick your brain on what would you do in each of these scenarios. So
I would call Bethany. That's what I do when I have these scenarios.
you would say, fix it, please.
Yes.
Okay, so the first one was a Sour Patch employee. This came up over the last few weeks. She was just coming in moody. She had not been previously moody, so she'd been with this practice for about almost a year. We were getting right close to a year, and always pleasant, perky, kind of that can-do attitude. When she first started with this practice, she was in the middle of building a house. It was kind of at a distance from the office, but she was excited about kind of the drive time and all of that. And then kind of fast forward a year, and these last few weeks, just something. We couldn't kind of put our fingers on what had switched. My client kind of described it as just like a light switch. It just kind of flipped on, and all of a sudden they had a Sour Patch employee on their hands, and they're kind of scratching their heads trying to figure out, okay, what do we do with the situation? She is a critical member of their team. They've depended upon her quite a bit. And they reached out to me and was like, okay, what do you think's going on? What should we do about this? And so I wanted to hear what you would do, and maybe you faced a situation where you've kind of come across the same thing, and you can kind of draw on some of that for us. So what would Kuba do?
I would definitely want to figure out, especially if they've been consistently non-drama moody, and then now suddenly we are. My first thought would be, what is going on at home?
Yeah.
And it's funny you say this, because I was talking to, I can't even remember who I was talking to not too long ago, and this colleague of mine said the same thing, and apparently it was an employee that's only worked with them for the last 3 months.
Okay.
But how she was this really great employee, and then all of a sudden she's kind of moody.
Yeah.
And then I said, well, does she have young kids? And he said, yeah, actually. I said, well, could it be back to school? Because now we're all, everybody's asking for time off, and we've got teacher orientation, and we've got all of these things. And I know I'm living it with my kids and their ages, and it's back to now yet another school year that, are we masking? Are we not? Are we, depending on your district. So there's just more to it than in the past.
Yeah.
And so that's what I asked him. I said, could it be that? And he's like, I'd never even thought about that.
Yeah.
Maybe that could be it. So point is, though, I would probably want to know what's going on at home, because oftentimes if it's a pressure pot in the office, which summer tends to be, and then what else could be going on at home.
Yeah.
So then trying to figure that out while keeping my, professional, crossing that line. I don't want to be too concerned, because at the end of the day, I still need you to perform. So I don't know. What did y'all do then? That's what I would want to figure out how.
So
what's
would
going on at
you
home.
kind of engage in a conversation then with her, or how do you get the answer, I guess, to those questions?
So depending on the situation and the employee, that's where I'll either call you and say, hey, can you reach out to so-and-so and this is what's going on, and see if you can figure out. So then you'll come in and usually say, hey, I'm kind of just checking in with everybody. It's a stressful summer, so we wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
Or a lot of times I'll just do it myself, which I'm reluctant to. One, not cross from boss to mama bear when they're not asking for it, and then also put myself in that situation of now if they disclose something to me and I'm supposed to do XYZ to make it better. But I will maybe either shoot a text or pull them in and say, hey, everything going good? How are you? Any concerns?
Just to have kind of more of a neutral conversation coming from you, more of a touch base, like how you doing type conversation.
True. And I don't do those very often.
Yeah.
Because usually I'm relying on you to do those, or we're picking up on signs earlier. So I think when I do it, the employee definitely is like, what's up? Yeah. And I'm like, well, you tell me what's up.
Yeah.
And so I guess that's the relationship I have with my employees, that I can just say, hey, is everything going okay? Or tell me about what happened this morning. Well, what do you mean what happened this morning? Well, you just didn't seem like yourself. Well, what do you mean I don't seem like myself? And so just depending on who it is and what it is, sometimes I'm just very direct.
Yeah.
And, well, you're being a Sour Patch. What is it? Or you snapped at so-and-so. What's going on? Who in the team is not pulling their weight that it's fallen on you?
Right.
And then hopefully then they can say, well, no, it's not another employee, or it is another employee. And then I can either figure out if there really is a problem or if there's a problem with you. And what are we doing about that?
So it sounds like you would try to draw the distinction between, is this kind of an outside of work stressor, or is this something inside work stress? It sounds like if you're getting involved, you're trying to figure out, is it outside or inside the office?
Right. And typically at that point, I'm thinking it's got to be a little bit of both. Probably if I'm seeing a dramatic mood switch in somebody that I hadn't seen it before, then I start thinking it's something at home, but then it's also something at work that, of course, every job, every work environment, you're not going to be super happy all the time. Right. And especially in the stress of summer. So is it normally you can brush those things off and laugh them off, and suddenly you can't anymore? So what is the difference? So yes, I guess that's a fair thing to say. Yeah, I kind of look at it from...
Do you feel like you wait to have that conversation to kind of get a... Like, if it is something very circumstantial, I mean, gosh, it could be PMS related, do you kind of wait and allow that to pass? Or do you feel like you're more prone to kind of jump in and address it pretty quickly?
I try to address it quicker before it mushrooms into something. I think in my own personal life, with my relationships with friends, husband, family, I think the longer you sit and mull on something, it's everybody's thinking their own thing. Yeah. So it's easier to nip it in the bud. So I definitely think the sooner. Now, if it's one incident, you let it go, but is that a huge red flag? Yeah. So I think just being very in tune with, and you got to know your staff's personalities and things like that too. This is another episode, but when you think about team personalities, and this, Bethany, from us working together, I always had such an attitude problem about, well, it doesn't really matter if your personality is perky or not perky, or whether you're detailed or not. The job requires you to post payments and collect this, so you got to figure it out.
Right.
So that was always for years, my thought was, what does it matter? Like, I had 2 people apply to this job. I picked this one. Yeah. So even if you don't like this part of your job, what do you want me to do about it? It's the job and you're the employee. Yeah. So for years I functioned like that. And I finally, the first half of my career by myself, that's what I did. And then the last half, it's been more like, okay, I get this personality thing. Yes, the job has to be done. And yes, you guys are the people to do it. But if I can figure out the personality to assign certain roles to, etc. Yeah. So like I said, that's a whole nother conversation. But in that process, my point is, if you get to know your employees, and so when you know their strengths and weaknesses, and then you're seeing, well, nothing's changed in what should be there, or they should be thriving. If they're this personality, yes, we're stressed, but this person likes working in this environment, etc. Yeah. So if I see something kind of out of the blue, I am going back to, what is your personality
I think that makes total sense because, again, it may be the certain personality type that is easily stressable. And so then if this is something that kind of pops up periodically and you're like, oh, there's Sour Patch again, and you look and you see, oh, they're really adverse to change, and change really stresses them out, and we've had a lot of change in the office, so it's no surprise that they're Sour Patch. Then some of that may be easily identifiable, whereas if we don't know our employees, that's really hard to figure out any kind of connection as to what in the office may actually be causing them to be Sour Patch.
So there's that, and again, the old me would say, well, you get stressed out by change. Sorry.
Yeah.
There is all this change. It is. The newer me is like, okay, well, let me talk to you and see. I'm assuming that it's the change that's what's bothering you.
Yeah.
It might just be one aspect of the change.
Yeah.
And it might be, so if we don't have the conversation and I'm just assuming what might be making you sour, I could miss it altogether. And then I might get myself in a tizzy.
Right.
Going, well, you've got to like change. What do you mean you don't like change? I don't like change either. But now I just bought this new software and this is supposed to help us and I invested in it and you should be grateful that I invest. So it's like I go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
So for me, yes, I like to address it sooner the better.
Yeah.
Before I start making assumptions.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's the right move. And in all honesty, the sooner we can get in there, we could prevent it from becoming this pot that eventually boils over. If we're able to kind of get to the employee fast enough where they don't have time to kind of brew on whatever's making them sour in that moment. So yeah, with this particular client, that's what I recommended to them, is to have to address it. It had been going on for weeks at this point. It was becoming more of a pattern of behavior. It was causing them to almost hesitate to make some even daily decisions regarding the schedule because they felt like, oh gosh, she's going to be moody about this and we don't want the moodiness. So it was starting to even impact their daily decision making. So especially when it's gotten to that point, any employee on your team, even if they're a chronic Sour Patch, if it's gotten you to the point where it stifles your decision making, that's a concern. It means that, okay, this has gone on far too long and we need to address this pretty quickly.
And that too, I would say this is probably true for most offices. By the time we meaning the dentist, the owner, is figuring it out,
yeah,
who knows how long the undertones
sure.
have been going. And then I start thinking about the other employees.
Yeah.
And they're watching this one sour up and functify the whole office. Are they now going, well, I can act this way. Why can she get away with this?
That's a good
why
point.
am I? So it really does, can really stink up the whole
team.
Yes.
The whole
team
atmosphere.
can end up sour.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's such a good point. If we don't stop it kind of early on, and even if it doesn't turn this team sour, it may turn them to where they kind of dread going to work. Because if they're walking on eggshells around this person, that's a terrible environment to show up and try to do your best work. So,
well, and I think that you just said it better. If I'm now walking on eggshells,
yeah,
I can only imagine what the team is going through.
So yeah, I think a conversation, anytime you've got either a chronically Sour Patch person that maybe a client's never dealt with before, it's time to deal with it. Or if this is something new. With this particular doctor, it was something new that had kind of sprung up. And so I encourage them to have they don't have a manager in this particular office. And so it's really the doctor that is the manager and having to deal with these front on. And that's okay. A lot of offices are in that boat. So I just encouraged her to get her, out of the office and away from the office for potentially a lunch or even an after work meeting or something like that. One of the reasons I suggest something off site is because even if we have a really private place in the office, that sometimes there can just be listening ears or people accidentally walking in on a conversation. If this person decides to kind of open up and there are some maybe even catastrophic things happening outside the office, then to have another employee kind of accidentally invade that privacy if she's crying or working through things, that can create a little bit of awkwardness on the team. So kind of away from the office. Also, we tend to kind of let our guard down outside the office a little bit more. We're able to disengage a little bit from the office and speak a little bit more openly. So away from the office conversation, and then to be able to speak it as plainly as possible. And I think you brought up something earlier. We got to take into consideration the employee's personality. So you and I both know that there's certain personalities that if we came at them very directly, you have been Sour Patch, this has popped up over the last few weeks and we've got to address it, they would crumble under that. But there are certain personality types that could just take a, hey, what in the heck is going on? Like whoa, what's happened over the last 3 weeks? You've been on fire. And they can take more of that direct conversation. So you kind of have to temper how directly you're going at it. But I wouldn't want to kind of walk around the issue. I wouldn't want to just stay on how is it going. I would want to eventually get to what specifically is happening with you. I've noticed a change in you over the last few weeks, and you've been intense, or you've seemed sad, or whatever the sour is. Can you kind of tell me what's going on with you personally? You know, I'm concerned at this point. The employee needs to know I've been seen. Like they have noticed what I've been putting out, whether or not I intended for people to notice it or not. They've picked up on it and they're aware and they're addressing it. So we want the employee to know this is kind of a big deal. You may not have realized it's a big deal, but it's a big deal to the point that somebody's sitting and talking with me.
So I've got a comment and then I've got a question.
Yeah.
My comment is, in previous offices that I worked in as an associate prior to opening my own, I think one of the things that stood out to me was when something did need to be addressed with an employee, and oftentimes it was addressed as, hey, everybody, let's come together.
Yeah.
And it was very sugar-coated and very positive and all of that. And oftentimes what that yielded was the ones that were doing everything great were the ones thinking, oh gosh, they're talking about me, I need to up my game.
Yes.
And then the ones that were like, the ones we were talking to were like, oh, okay, well, somebody's got to fix something. And I'm just like, no, we were talking to you.
Yep.
So when I started my own, in my own mind, I was like, I'm not going to be a sugar coater.
Yeah.
And I tend to have a direct personality anyway. Looking back on it early on, the number of employees that I think I ended up scaring off, being rude to.
Yeah.
In my plight to not sugarcoat and be direct, that they would, and in my mind, I was helping them.
Yep.
Because if I don't tell you directly, and then you're guessing, then I haven't helped you improve. So I don't want to do that. I want to help you improve. So I'm gonna lay it straight.
Right.
Now I look back on that, I'm like, oh my God, these people probably still have horror nightmares about meeting with me. Like it makes me feel really awful. Because it was kind of this approach of, well, direct. Everybody needs it direct.
Yeah.
And so I think that was another thing that once I figured out the personalities thing,
yes,
I can still get my point across, but I've got to figure out which hat I need to put on. And I'm not going to know that if I don't know my employee.
Well, and I feel like you do a good job too of coming at those conversations. It's not just this is an offense against me, or this is impacting my practice, so I've got to address it. I feel like you tend to tone those conversations, even the very direct ones, with a very employee focused message, I guess is what I would say. You know, you're never like, hey, you got to fix this because this is a problem for me. That is never the tone. I think your tone comes across from, I'm concerned about you and I want to make sure you're okay. And then eventually it may get to, yes, I'm concerned about you, and I'm also concerned because this impacts the practice in this way. But I don't think you lead with that. That's very seldom that I've seen you lead with that.
It's taken a long time to get there and to try to figure out the strategy. Yeah. And so every time a Sour Patch presents itself, it's herself, himself. It's, what best way could I phrase this that I'm not sugarcoating it and you get the point.
Right.
But also, here's the downstream impact of what it is that you're doing. And this is why we're talking about this. But it's still stressful every time. Yeah. So it's just the comment was, that's where the personalities come in handy because I was missing the mark. And I feel horrible now for some of the things that, I don't even remember what I said, but I remember the tone and the vibe. Yeah. And I'm like, I've probably crushed people without meaning to, like honestly thinking I was helping them because I was
Right.
being so clear in my mind. And no, terrible approach, terrible thing to do. The question I have for you, so now you're saying it's best to go off-site if you can. How does that work in that, say it was, you said this happened this past week. So suppose, you know, and the person was having issues for the past several weeks, and this week perhaps something came to a head, or maybe you were in their office and that's when you heard about it or whatever it was.
Yeah.
But then trying to find time for that employee and yourself
Yeah.
to go off site. But then if you say go off site, now the employee's thinking something.
Yeah.
And so how, logistic wise, what do you recommend
How do we
for that?
actually get that done? So this is where it can kind of come to, is this a chronically Sour Patch person? And when I say chronically Sour Patch, they're good for a few months. Something pops up. We've got to squash it. They're good for a few months. Something pops up.
Isn't every employee like that? I feel like,
Maybe. Yes.
Okay.
Thought-provoking
Anyway,
comment there.
Nonetheless.
If they're chronically, like every day is a Sour Patch day, you really need to consider if they should be on the team. So when I am saying chronically Sour Patch, if this is just something that pops up every few months, you have to put a lid on it. I think that's totally appropriate to do in the office. Again, as private of a space as possible, and you can still make a space private. So let's say the doctor has a small office, then you can set up an appointment on the schedule, you know, meeting time between doctor and Sarah, and that way everybody knows not to interrupt you during that time. So you can make it pretty private.
So, sorry, I'm going to interrupt you there.
Yeah.
Does that not inflame things that now everybody's seeing on the schedule that there's a...
That's a great, as long as we have a habit of consistently meeting with employees, it shouldn't stand out. And
So if you've never done it before, then
It's
maybe
gonna
this
stand
is
out.
not the
Exactly.
time to start.
yeah, I agree completely.
Okay.
If you've never met with an employee before, then I would, again, make this offsite something more private.
Or would it be okay to do like an event, like you're saying, but just put do not book?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that way everybody knows that something's going on, but nobody knows what it
Absolutely.
is. And then you could go privately pull the person and...
And that should launch you into more consistent one-on-one meetings. So we got to, it doesn't mean that these have to be every week, every month, even every quarter, but we need to have an atmosphere where a one-on-one meeting doesn't always mean the sky is falling and something really bad is happening. Your employees need to know, oh, she pulled her in to have a conversation, or he pulled her in to have a conversation, and that doesn't mean there's some huge drama brewing. So yeah, I think if this is something brand new, then we need to keep that a little bit more private, probably off-site in that particular case, so that the rumor mill doesn't start happening inside the office. As far as logistics, if it is a non-chronically Sour Patch employee, so like this client, like she has been exceedingly pleasant for the whole year, and this is popping up, the reason that I would suggest logistically offsite, so that's either booking a longer lunch, so we just kind of look at a schedule and figure out, okay, when can I block maybe an additional 30-40 minutes to be out of the office, or at the end of the day. For this employee, end of day wouldn't work because she did have a drive home, so they had to make a lunchtime work, and they just blocked the schedule to make sure that they had time to be away from the office.
So in this case, like, again, you're saying this happened this week for you. Mm-hmm. Were they able to meet this week?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they were able to make it happen. Some offices, that may be a longer period of time, and if that's the case, then we may just have to figure out how to make that in-office meeting work so that we're not having to book extra time to drive to the restaurant. You could also, depending upon gender, you can always ride together. It depends. With a male doctor and a female staff member, we might want to be a little bit cautious on that. If you've got a manager that can go with you into this meeting, then that would work out better from a car ride standpoint. I don't think that it is inappropriate for a male doctor to be having a meeting with a female employee outside of the office. I just might not recommend a car ride to that location if there's not a manager that can join in on the meeting. So those are some of the logistics that you wouldn't necessarily have to think about being a female practice owner.
I'm not driving with. That's super awkward. super awkward as far as I'm concerned, because now the employee's kind of going, why are we going to lunch? What did you want to talk about? Then we're all making this tense. How are you? So how was your day?
Yeah.
So how was this? And no, let's just drive separate, get there.
And I think
might
that
make
makes
some
total
excuse
sense.
like I got to get gas or whatever it is.
Something to just kind of officially start the conversation when you get to the restaurant. And I
Yes.
think that works great as well. I think if you're on a time crunch and you do feel comfortable enough, if riding in the car with somebody is something you normally do, you can start the conversation in the car. And that way the awkwardness is kind of out of the way, and it just kind of extends so that you're not having to plan 10 minutes to get to the restaurant and then we got to order lunch and all of that. If you really are cramped for time, you could do that. The only time I would hesitate is if you're going to be uncomfortable starting that conversation in the car and that makes it awkward, or if it's just the male doctor and a female employee and nobody else that can be in the car. That's, I probably wouldn't recommend that. So
you're going to tell us what happened? Like, what was it with this one?
Yeah. So unfortunately, there's no resolution at this point. So the conversation did happen. And this doctor was able to say, hey, you know, what's been going on? I've noticed a change in you. I've been worried about, is it, you know, drive related? Are you really getting, you know, burdened down with that drive? And she did say, the employee did say that the drive had been harder than she had expected, but she didn't feel like that was what was causing her to be, we didn't call it sour. This client obviously didn't call it sour, but, you know, upset or frustrated or anything like that. She mentioned that she felt like the schedule had been really, really, really busy, and that there was just a lot of changes happening on the schedule, and this is where personality comes in. She's not a person that can handle change very well, and so she felt like that had happened as well over the last few weeks. That was something that had been irritating her. My client was like, I didn't see a big change in the schedule, so I just don't feel like it's that, because there wasn't anything new that had happened in the schedule. They had been running the schedule pretty much the same way. This lady had a loss in her family, a death in the family, and the employee never brought that up. So my client didn't know whether that was part of what was happening here. So there's no real resolution. What my client intends to do is, if there isn't any change in behavior over the next week or two, then she's going to do another meeting where they kind of talk through some things. Now, what's creative about this solution is, even though nothing came out of that exact conversation, my client was really wise in that the drive was a stressor. That was the one thing that did come out in the meeting, but the employee said it was not related to the drive. So she was kind of getting mixed messages from the employee. So what my client decided to do is that she had the ability to take tolls, and it would cut her drive time down by like 35%. And she wasn't taking those tolls. She was trying to save money. So what my client just decided in that moment is, this is an easy problem for me to solve, and I want to show you that I care for you. And so I want to give you I think it was I can't remember the dollar amount, but a stipend each month that just, you mentally take that and put it towards the tolls. And that means you've got a shorter drive. And if that reduces your stress and you can come in more energetic because you were able to leave the house later and you didn't have all that traffic on the road you've been driving on, let's try that and see if that helps. And so we'll see if that makes any kind of impact over the next couple weeks. And if not, she has the intention of kind of getting back with her. So I wanted to use this as an example, because even though this conversation happens, it doesn't mean that there's 100% clarity coming out of this. We might try a few things, tinker with a few things, and then we may have to keep revisiting this until either A, the employee no longer is Sour Patch, something worked out, or B, we're trying to figure out, do we need to keep this employee on our team because she's not making changes. So that's the result of that one. So
again, two questions here. One, did your client give clear-cut examples?
Yes,
okay.
She did. And again, hers was more the beginning of the day. They noticed the biggest change in how the employee entered the office. So previously she walked in perky, happy, so on and so forth. And then over these last 3 weeks, they would notice the change in the morning meeting. And then that change would stay. So it was pervasive throughout the day. So she kind of brought this tone into the morning huddle.
So they'll be able to, quote, track
Yeah.
if the talk was helpful
Yeah.
or not, and whether the employee acknowledges it and whether she's willing to
Yeah.
make a change. Okay. The second question, again, this could lead to a different conversation. So if we need to, keep it for another time. But my concern with the offering to pay the toll tag stipend is, well, what about everybody else then?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what about everybody else then?
Why? Yes, you can't treat unfairly, right? So this is one of those things that if you find yourself in the position that you're offering something specific to an employee, there has to be very clear instructions on why you're offering it, number one, and of course the privacy associated with that. If you feel like this is an employee that would not maintain privacy, I would not recommend offering any kind of special accommodation, special stipend, or anything like that. And on your team who your talkers are and who your more mature.
I assume everybody's a talker. I don't think there's anybody who, at some point they will tell somebody else.
Yeah. The other alternative is you could do a pay raise that is not a stipend, not specifically associated with that, and just go, forget the stipend. I was going to pay this much in a stipend, but let's actually do this instead. And so that would be a more fair way, because raises are more consistent in the office. They happen across most employees, I would say. So that may be a more fair way of extending some kind of help to that particular employee. The other option that just hit me as we were sitting here talking is you do, and it's sporadic and periodic, but you'll do periodically just like a I appreciate you type gift. I think you just did one, a few months ago for some people on the team that were just pulling their weight, doing extra awesome. And you're like, hey, I think I'm going to do this and it was a gift type thing that you did for them. But that may be also a way around more, instead of the monthly stipend, you're looking at, hey, I just want you to know, here's a token of appreciation. I do appreciate you. I feel like, and it's performance specific. I feel like you've really done a knockout job with this. You've handled this well. You've taken on this for me. Just know that I appreciate you. And so then it's more specific. It's a one-time kind of gift, and it's not something that we're, doing on an ongoing way.
So then another question on that, because I've debated on those too, is that do you do it in private with just this employee?
Yeah.
Or is it like, but then nobody else knows that that if you do work hard and you do focus and you are keeping the practice productive and you're not bringing in the drama, that these people do get rewarded for, but if I'm doing it privately, then nobody knows.
Right.
And so, but if I say, hey guys, our star for the month is so-and-so.
Yes.
They've done this is the reward.
Yeah.
So then the goal is that everybody else is like, oh, well, then that's going to be me next time, which then is a whole nother set of questions, issues, logistics. So anyway, I guess I'm not trying to make this more difficult. I think at the surface, that's a great idea. Oh yeah, well sure, I'll cover your tolls, no big deal. And then I start going, oh, what did you just do?
Yeah.
Because I feel like that was me.
Yeah.
Years ago, that was me, where I'm just not really thinking about the other moving parts.
The other connections.
Yeah. And then it's like, well, what about my drive? Well, what about my drive? Well, what about my gas?
Yeah.
And so...
Also, to your point on the kind of public acknowledgement, if somebody has been in a Sour Patch mode, I would never want to publicly thank them and they're just being an awesome team member. That is going to cause a ripple effect with your team that you do not want, because then it reinforces that behavior. Well, if she can be grumpy and awful and rude and she gets publicly acknowledged, what can I get away with? So we got to be careful with public acknowledgement of the Sour Patch. Now, if this is kind of connect with a different topic, but I think it's related to this. What if? Let's play the what if game. We didn't get clear answers on this Sour Patch employee. What if it was just she likes to be acknowledged? She likes to be appreciated. She likes to hear that she's done a great job. And what if we have just been so tied up and so busy with the practice that we have been void in that area? And so now all of a sudden we have a Sour Patch employee that really is only sour because they feel like they've given this practice their all and haven't been acknowledged for it. could we have some type of, even if it's a mental checklist of, every quarter, or I've even got clients that do this on a monthly basis at their monthly staff meeting. They have an employee of the month, and there's very specific reasons that this person has earned the employee of the month, and there's a bonus or a gift associated with that. But if we don't have that, if we don't have something just consistent in place, even just a mental note to ourselves quarterly, I'm going to pick an employee and I'm going to publicly, thank them, acknowledge them. That could, in a lot of circumstances, prevent Sour Patch employees. Not 100%. There's going to be things that we can't control, but it's making sure that we've taken a moment to publicly acknowledge and appreciate our employees, whether that's consistently built in or just something that we make a mental note to do. So there we go. Okay, are you ready for Sour Patch employee number 2?
Okay.
So the first one was kind of an unknown. We don't know why. Have the meeting. Let's figure it out. We still don't have answers on that one. The second Sour Patch employee is pay related. So this employee, very similarly to the first one, has been just perky, positive, good foundational employee. And she started developing a desire for more income. This ties back to some of our episodes that we've done. This is very specific to everybody being paid more right now, in all honesty. So she kind of got on that bandwagon and wanted to make more. So she had a direct, conversation. I want to make more money. She brought that to the employer's attention. And since that has kind of been on this chronic path of I wouldn't say sour, just not her normal little perky, awesome self. She's very reserved in her communication. And my assumption is that it's directly connected to these pay expectations that she's had. So what would Kuba do in this situation? You've got an employee on your team that maybe has an unmet need. Let's call it that. Maybe it's financial, maybe it's something else, and they are becoming sour over that. What would you do?
So at this point, if they're asking, let's stick to the money. So they've expressed that, so they've told me I want to get paid more. Mm-hmm. So what do I think?
Yeah.
Like, do I think they deserve to get paid more, or do I not?
I think given the current post-pandemic environment, you want to keep this employee. They do a good job. Are they your, A star, perfect employee? No, but they do a good job, and you would not want to lose this employee.
Okay. Well, if I don't want to lose them, then I guess I would, because my assumption is the reserved and all of that, they probably feel underappreciated. Yes. They're probably on their high horse going, I'm so great. I do this. And maybe they do.
Right.
So where's my compensation? Where's my appreciation? So I guess that would be one thing that I would be thinking about. Well, is the pay fair?
Right.
What would it cost me to replace this person versus giving them the raise?
Yeah.
I don't want to just give a raise because you asked for a raise, though.
Yeah.
And I definitely don't want to make it that every time you come back and ask.
Right.
So that's where I would I would also make sure that I'm being very mindful, like you said, of am I showing you enough appreciation? Because I think that's always tied in with the raise.
Yep.
Because you feel like you have earned something more. And so are you being acknowledged and compensated? I think it's both.
Yeah.
So one, I would kind of go back and see, like, have I expressed, what you were just saying, the acknowledgement.
Yeah.
Second, then I would kind of go back and think, okay, well, what do you think you're bringing to the team? I would make them come up with a list of things and say, hey, get this to me by a week's time. And I want to know what you think that you're bringing that is more advanced than when you started, because our raises are based on performance. And so when you first started, you were being paid this because of these tasks that you were said that you were proficient in. Yeah. And so, you've kept your employment. So clearly we believe that you're there, but what else are you bringing to the practice?
Right.
So I really want them to have some accountability for that. Because I think then otherwise you go downhill very quickly. Yeah. Because then you get into that situation of, well, I want a raise and otherwise I'm leaving, and you're back to that, you've got me And I think a good number of them don't understand. They don't understand what the whole overview of the business looks like. All they're seeing is, I do this, 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 and this. And honestly, outside of dentistry, just knowing family members and other friends and all of that, and things that I hear about them in their own work environments that are not dental, that are corporate jobs or whatever it is. And I don't get this, this, this. And I'm thinking, well, you're one piece of this gigantic framework.
Exactly.
But you think you're the framework.
Right.
And so really putting it in perspective, and I think that's what we've done with some of ours, that it's like, no, you're a good, solid employee. Well, I don't think you're doing anything different to impact the practice.
Right.
So what new skill have you learned? When you first started here, you maybe didn't know what the ISO dry was, and we taught you how to use that. And so now you're very proficient in that. But what else can I add to your plate? Well, your verbiage and documentation is not good. So not only do your chart notes are not appropriate and they add work to my plate.
Right.
I cannot put you on sending letters to patients. I can't put you on following this marketing plan. Or are you really good with organization? Nope, that's not good either. So what is your new skill set that you are bringing to the practice?
Yeah.
And then maybe having I think you've been really pivotal in helping us create this. It's okay. Even the employees that I'm bringing up, I think this one needs a raise.
Yeah.
Like, I want to get to it before they have to ask for it. I want to bring it up that, hey, you are being seen. Your work is being recognized.
Yes.
Especially in this post-pandemic environment. I've been
massive.
very proactive on that. And then saying, well, what would merit and warrant this raise?
Yes.
So, you now have your sealant course you finished.
Yeah.
And you are independently doing sealants. We've gone through our 3 months of where we monitor you, and now you're doing them, and we've not seen a problem.
Right.
And you are now going to take over the OSHA binder. Great.
Right.
Well, because of all those things that you're doing,
Yeah.
your pay is now being raised to this amount. Great job. Or if it's one of those employees that you're like, no, you haven't done anything. You just show up.
Yeah.
You show up to your job. You don't realize these 3 headaches you create on a daily basis, but we compensate for those.
Yeah.
So how about 2 of those headaches you don't make anymore? What are you going to do to learn whatever you need to do for that? Are you going to go take some English classes to work on your grammar?
Yeah.
Are you going to go learn more procedures so that when I ask you for the contouring pliers, you're not like handing me everything in the drawer? Like, what are you going to do to specifically improve your skill set that now you're a more productive member of the team? For me, we also have a lot of opportunities for growth in the office.
Yes.
We have our ADA membership, our PDAA membership, our TAPD membership, all of these things where you have a lot of resources that I've invested in for you to learn and watch this webinar, watch this, and oh, I don't believe you took advantage of any of those free webinars that we had. So why don't we work on that then? Because you're asking for a raise. And so for me, as far as you being more productive, these are the things that I think you could be more productive in.
Yeah.
Let's give you a deadline of a month. See what you can do. Show me that you've improved in these areas, and then we can talk about your raise.
Well, and I like how you said a specific timeline as well. And you're kind of approaching it from 2 ways. If you've got an underperforming employee that is asking for a raise because they've been here for a year, it's an opportunity to clarify, we don't do raises that way in this office. It's not just you're here and you get a raise. We do performance-based improvements and pay raises. So then you're talking to the underperforming employee, and you're going, okay, here's your list of things that I think you could really use some improvement on. Let's put together a plan. What's your plan for improving this? How much time do you think is realistic for you to make these improvements? Okay, you need 2 months. Let's circle back and continue the conversation in 2 months. And if we can see some market improvements in these areas, we may be able to consider a raise at that point. If in 2 months you feel like you need some more time to perfect those things that we've talked about, then we can extend the timeline at that point. So you're kind of approaching the underperforming employee in a certain way. For the employee that you feel like is performing adequately, you're setting new goals for them. Performance is what drives pay raises here. So what, from a performance standpoint, could you add to your plate to positively impact the practice. Okay, you want to get your sealant certification. You want to be able to add that to our practice. Great. That's about a 3 or 4 month process. Let's let you get the course. Let's let you make sure that you're doing the sealants well. And then we'll circle back. And once we feel like you've gotten that skill set down, we'll talk about a raise at that point. I think that's a great, so you're not leaving it as this hanging, no, you don't get that raise and we'll talk about it later. You've got a very clear timeline of things that they can do, either from an underperforming standpoint or from just a gaining skills standpoint that they can do to earn that raise.
Absolutely. And I think the adequate employee, that's always, I mean, you're fine.
Yeah.
But there's always something else we could add to your plate. And the more that we can add to somebody's plate and not have to hire a whole nother employee to do things.
Yeah.
I would rather pay you if you can do it, but can you do it? And I think the other thing that's nice about that is it gives us an opportunity, like you were saying previously, about trying to set up more meetings with the team. Yeah. So this is one where I'm like, I can tell this person is thinking that they are all that. And I'm going, they have no idea they're not all that.
Right.
They think they are.
Yeah.
And so how do I put that in a perspective that I'm not crushing you, right? Because I do want you to continue to do well in the things that you do well in. But if there are 10 office tasks, you do very well in 3. You don't do very well in all 10. And you seem to think the 3 is all that the office does. So then taking those opportunities to say, hey, I know you're interested in a raise. Yeah. Let's talk about a goal strategy to get you there.
Right. And it removes some of the feelings out of it. Yes. It is much more of a very black and white. Now, that request may be coming out of feelings. This kind of ties in with what we were talking about with the millennial, workforce. They're very much feeling oriented. And so it may be, I feel unappreciated, and so I'm going to ask for a raise because I think that will make me feel appreciated. So it's not that feelings aren't a part of this conversation, but we need to kind of remove it off of feelings and put it more to a very objective, let's work towards these things, and being able to even ask them, okay, so what are the 10 tasks that really should be required in your position? Oh, it's this, it's this, it's this, it's this. Okay, and let's talk through, maybe even let's just do a quick game. Let's kind of rate yourself on all of these. Insurance verification. 10 meaning you know everything about it. 1 meaning you know nothing. Well, how would you rate yourself? A 2. Okay, and then you said the next task is this, and you can kind of walk through those and just have them do a quick knee-jerk, let's rate yourself, to be able to show them. And maybe even if they're misinformed on one of them and they're like, oh, I'm an 8 on insurance verification. You're like, oh, no, I would actually rate you a 5. And that's because we've had patients come into the office and there's been mistakes on that verification. So that maybe that's an area that you're not seeing. We're doing a poor job of showing those mistakes to you, but I would rate you as a 5 on that. So we need to make some improvements. And so it's just very black and white.
And it's very eye-opening on both sides.
Yes.
It's very eye-opening to see how they perceive themselves versus how you perceive them versus how both of you perceive the role altogether.
So I think that is such a good takeaway from this conversation, is to make sure that we've had a very objective conversation about the pay and what actually increases their pay. I would also say it's really interesting. I was in a different pay conversation recently, and I could tell there was a disconnect on what the doctor was thinking was a pay increase and what the employee was thinking was a pay increase. So I'm like, this is going to continue to be a problem if I don't ask a very direct question. So I was in on this meeting, and so I asked the employee, I said, tell me what you were hoping the pay increase would be. And it was substantially higher than the doctor was gifting her in that moment. And so I said, oh, okay, so you were wanting it to be, I think she was wanting 18 or 19 an hour. It was a $2 bump, and we were doing a $1 bump. I said, oh, okay, so you were wanting $2 an hour. What made you think that would be possible? Like what in your mind kind of led to thinking it would be a $2 bump? And It turns out she had previously had a $2 bump. She was brought in fresh out of school. So this particular office hires at a very base amount when you have no experience, and then you're able to make more significant bumps in pay. Well, in her mind, that was going to be typical.
It was a precedent that was set in her mind.
Yes. So she was just confused in that moment. So we had to take a moment to kind of pause, like, whoa, let's hit the stop button and go, oh, we hire much lower and we want to get you up to a higher amount more quickly. But once we get you up to more market rate and you're handling all of the skills that we want you to be handling, well, then you really have to push to get that raise because you've got a good baseline now. Now we're really having to look for things that you can do to moderately, increase your pay. And so that was helpful for her to go, oh, this is not now the norm. The new norm is going to be I have to work a little bit harder to get just a small pay bump. And so sometimes we may have to ask that question. If we feel like, oh, wow, I feel really excited. I'm giving this employee $1 an hour raise and they don't seem impressed by that. We may have to kind of hit the pause button and go, tell me what you're thinking right now. What were you hoping your pay increase would be just to get it out on the table? So that's another suggestion too in this conversation. Okay, good. Do you have any Sour Patch examples that you want to throw in the mix, or do you feel like we hit all of the ones that you would have talked about?
I think we hit them. Honestly, I do. I think the Sour Patches, we're all human. I'm sure I'm a Sour Patch my fair share of the time.
They're a fact of life.
They're a fact of life, and it's just trying to figure out what is it? Is there something that can be done?
Yeah.
And sometimes there is, and sometimes there isn't.
Yeah. It's the challenges of dentistry and managing these lovely people that work for us, right?
And owning a business.
That's right.
Yep.
That's right. Awesome.
Thanks for joining the conversation today. We hope that you are comforted in knowing that you are not alone, but we also hope that you're walking away with some really great tips and tricks to try in your practice. We value your feedback, so please take a few moments to rate and review the podcast. Finally, we want to make sure that we're covering the topics that matter to you. So track us down on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and let us know what topics you want us to cover. As always, please know that we are rooting for you today as you manage your dental drama.